Michael had always dreamed of a life where he could give his children everything he never had. Born into poverty, he worked tirelessly for years, pushing himself beyond exhaustion, traveling from country to country, building his business step by step. His story was the type people often read about in magazines, a man who went from nothing to becoming a millionaire through sheer hard work and determination. But while he gained wealth, luxury, and recognition, he had lost something quietly along the way, the simple presence in his children's lives. Emma and Ethan, his 5-year-old twins, had been only babies when he left for what was supposed to be a short business trip. That trip turned into years of meetings, negotiations, and endless projects. Yes, he came home occasionally, and yes, he sent gifts more often than he could count: toys, clothes, even small ponies for the garden. But his visits were always short, almost rushed. He would smile, hug them, and then leave again, convincing himself that one day he would make up for it all. Now, after nearly 2 years abroad, Michael was finally coming home without warning. He wanted to surprise everyone, especially his children. He had pictured the scene in his mind countless times during his long flights. Emma and Ethan would see him, run into his arms, and he would finally feel like the father he had always promised himself he would be. As the black car pulled into the long driveway of his mansion, Michael's heart beat faster. The house stood tall, elegant, and silent against the afternoon sky. He remembered when he first bought it. Back then, it had felt like a castle. But now, looking at its large, empty windows, it seemed less like a home and more like a lonely monument to his success. He stepped out of the car quietly, asking the driver not to announce his arrival. He wanted this moment to be his, raw and real. The gravel crunched softly beneath his shoes as he walked toward the front door. His hand trembled slightly as he turned the key, the very same key he had carried in his pocket all these years, almost like a charm reminding him of what he was working for. The door opened with a gentle creak, and at once, a wave of memories hit him. The familiar scent of polished wood, the faint fragrance of flowers in the hallway, the distant ticking of the grandfather clock, everything was the same, yet strangely different. He paused for a moment, taking it in, his chest tightening with anticipation. The house was unusually quiet. He expected the usual footsteps of maids, the faint sound of television, maybe even laughter. But instead, there was only silence. For a moment, panic gripped him. Where were his children? Were they out? Was his plan of surprising them about to fail? He stepped deeper into the house, his polished shoes making soft sounds against the marble floor. He set his suitcase down carefully, almost afraid the noise would break the delicate stillness around him. His eyes scanned the living room, the couches neatly arranged, the table spotless, toys stacked in one corner. Everything looked in place, but there was no sign of life. Just as worry began to creep in, he heard it. A sound. Soft laughter. High-pitched, innocent, musical laughter, the laughter of children. His heart skipped a beat. He knew that sound better than any other. It was Emma and Ethan. Without thinking, his feet moved quickly, following the echo. His steps grew faster as he crossed the hallway, his pulse racing with excitement. The laughter led him to the playroom. The door was slightly open, and through the gap, he could see a faint glow of sunlight streaming in from the large window. He slowed his steps now, not wanting to spoil the surprise too quickly. A smile spread across his face as he thought about the moment he would step inside, and his children would see him standing there. But as he reached the doorway, his smile froze. He stood still, almost afraid to breathe, his hand gripping the door frame. What he saw inside was not what he had imagined during all those sleepless nights abroad. On the soft carpet, surrounded by crayons, scattered books, and colorful blocks, sat his twins. Emma was scribbling something with a red crayon, her eyes sparkling with concentration. Ethan was giggling, clapping his hands as though celebrating a small victory. And beside them, kneeling on the floor with her hair tied back neatly and her face glowing with gentle patience, was Clara the maid. Michael had known Clara for years. She had been employed at his house long before the twins were born, helping his wife with household duties. When his wife passed away unexpectedly, Clara had stayed on, becoming almost invisible in his busy world. To him, she was simply the maid, reliable, quiet, and trustworthy. He had never once imagined her as anything more. But what he was witnessing now made his breath catch. Clara wasn't cleaning, nor was she just watching them from a distance. She was teaching them. Her voice was soft but firm as she guided Ethan's small hands over the page of a picture book. She pointed to the letters, repeating them slowly, encouraging him to try. When Emma grew frustrated that her crayon drawing didn't look like the picture, Clara pulled her close, kissed her forehead lightly, and whispered something that made Emma smile again. The twins' laughter, their comfort, their closeness, it was all centered around her. Michael's chest tightened. For years, he had believed that money and gifts would fill the gap of his absence. He had thought that by providing the best house, the best clothes, and the best toys, he was being a good father. But here, in this simple room, he realized something he had been blind to: love could not be replaced with money. He stood there frozen, 1,000 thoughts rushing through his head. Should he step in now, break the moment, and announce his return? Or should he stay silent a little longer, watching the bond he had unknowingly left someone else to build with his own children? His heart longed to run to them, to hold them, to tell them how much he had missed them. Yet another part of him was struck with guilt so heavy it rooted him to the floor. Clara had given them what he hadn't: time, presence, and love. As he leaned quietly against the door frame, trying to steady his emotions, a single tear formed in the corner of his eye. He had returned home to surprise his children, but instead, he found himself surprised by the truth. Michael stayed by the doorway, his body tense as if frozen in time. His eyes refused to blink, his heart refused to calm down. Every second he watched felt like a story unfolding before him, a story he had been absent from for too long. Inside the room, Clara's voice carried warmth, the kind that wrapped around the twins like a blanket. She was showing Ethan a set of colorful flashcards. "This is the letter A," she said slowly, pointing with her finger. Ethan repeated after her, his small voice uncertain but eager. His sister Emma giggled, clapping her hands. Clara smiled at the little boy's attempt, not in a way that mocked him, but in a way that lifted his spirit higher. "Good job, Ethan. You're so smart," she said, ruffling his hair gently. The boy beamed with pride, his tiny chest puffing up as though he had just conquered the world. Michael's throat tightened. He had missed this. He had missed the daily victories, the tiny steps his children were taking to grow into their own little people. He remembered the day they were born, how he had promised them silently, as he held them in his trembling hands, that he would always be there. But life had pulled him away, whispering in his ear that work was necessary, that success was the way to secure their future. Now, standing at the doorway, he questioned everything he had once believed. Emma suddenly tugged at Clara's sleeve, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Tell the story again," she said, her voice filled with excitement. Clara chuckled. "Again? Haven't you heard it enough times already?" "No," both children shouted at the same time, their voices full of laughter. Clara reached for a well-worn storybook lying on the carpet. Its corners were frayed, the colors faded, but it was clearly loved. She opened it with care, as if the book itself was precious, and began to read in a voice that brought the words to life. Michael listened, his chest rising and falling with emotion. Clara didn't just read, she acted. She changed her tone for each character, widened her eyes at dramatic parts, and softened her voice at gentle ones. Emma and Ethan were spellbound, their little bodies leaning forward, their faces glowing with wonder. And then something happened that made Michael's heart ache even more. As Clara read the story of a brave rabbit protecting its family, Ethan leaned against her shoulder. His small fingers clutched her sleeve as if it was the safest place in the world. Emma, not wanting to be left out, crawled into Clara's lap, resting her head against the maid's chest. Clara did not push them away. Instead, she wrapped her arms around them naturally, her voice flowing like a lullaby as she continued reading. Michael's eyes stung. He had imagined his children running into his arms the moment he returned, but the reality was different. The arms they trusted most, the lap they found comfort in, belonged not to him, but to the woman he had once seen as only a helper in his house. He wanted to be angry at himself, angry at fate, even angry at Clara for stepping into a role that should have been his. But when he looked closer, he couldn't feel anger. All he felt was gratitude and guilt tangled together like vines around his heart. Clara had not stolen their love. She had earned it. She had filled the emptiness he had left behind, not because she wanted to, but because the children needed her. Just then, Emma looked up at Clara with wide, innocent eyes. "Clara, will Daddy come home soon?" Michael's breath caught. Clara paused for a moment, her lips curving into a small, thoughtful smile. "Of course, sweet one. Your daddy loves you very much. He's working very hard, but one day, you'll see he will come home and hug you tight." Emma's face softened, her worry melting away. Ethan looked up too, hope lighting up his little eyes. "Do you think he'll play with us?" he asked. Clara brushed his cheek with her hand. "Yes, Ethan. He will. Daddies always want to play with their children when they are home." Michael's chest ached so badly he had to press his hand against it. She had defended him. Despite all his absence, despite all the times he had chosen business meetings over bedtime stories, Clara had kept his image alive in their hearts. She could have easily told them he was too busy, too far, or that he didn't care enough. But she hadn't. Instead, she had planted hope where disappointment could have grown. For a long moment, Michael leaned against the doorframe, his emotions too heavy to move. Then, as if guided by something stronger than himself, he stepped inside quietly. The twins were so caught up in the story that they didn't notice him at first. But Clara did. Her eyes lifted, and when she saw Michael standing there, her lips parted in surprise. She almost dropped the book, her face frozen between shock and uncertainty. Michael raised a finger to his lips, silently asking her not to say anything yet. Clara's eyes flickered with confusion, then softened with understanding. She nodded faintly, keeping the moment intact. Michael's gaze shifted back to his children. He could see their joy, their innocence, and the way they leaned into Clara without a care in the world. It was beautiful, and it was painful. He had expected to come home to children who missed him desperately, who would cling to him the moment they saw him. Instead, he found children who had already built their safe world with someone else's help. But instead of jealousy, he felt humbled. Perhaps this was the lesson he needed. Slowly, he walked closer, each step measured, each breath heavy. Emma was the first to notice. Her eyes widened, and she gasped loudly. "Daddy!" Ethan turned around too, his jaw dropping, his little hands reaching up. "Daddy!" he cried. Michael's world lit up. In an instant, both children ran to him, their tiny feet padding against the carpet. They crashed into his legs, hugging him tightly, their laughter bubbling like a song. He bent down, scooping them up into his arms, holding them as if he would never let go. Tears blurred his vision. He kissed their cheeks, their hair, their tiny hands, whispering, "I missed you. I missed you so much." His voice cracked, but he didn't care. Clara watched quietly, her hands still holding the book, her eyes soft with something between relief and quiet pride. She didn't interrupt, didn't step forward, didn't remind him of what she had been doing all these years. She simply smiled, knowing this reunion was his moment. For Michael, time stood still. He had returned with the idea of surprising his children, but he realized the greater surprise had been for him. He had walked in fearing he might be forgotten, but instead, he was embraced with love. Yet at the same time, he had seen a truth that would never leave him: his children had survived his absence because of Clara's quiet devotion. As he held Emma and Ethan close, his eyes met Clara's across the room. No words were spoken, but in that silent exchange, Michael knew two things with absolute certainty: he owed her more than he could ever repay, and he could never let himself drift so far from his children again. The twins clung to their father as if they feared he might vanish again. Michael held them tighter, breathing in the sweet scent of their hair, the warmth of their little arms wrapped around his neck. His chest rose and fell unevenly, his heart heavy with both joy and guilt. He had longed for this moment, but now that it was here, it was far more overwhelming than he had imagined. Emma pulled back slightly, her bright eyes sparkling with wonder. "Daddy, you're really here?" she asked, almost as if she thought he might disappear like a dream. Michael kissed her forehead gently. "Yes, my princess. I'm here, and I'm not leaving today." Ethan buried his face against his father's shoulder, his little voice muffled. "I missed you." Michael's throat tightened. "I missed you too, my boy. More than you know." For a few moments, he just stood there, savoring their closeness. But then his gaze drifted over their shoulders and landed on Clara. She stood quietly by the window, the book still in her hand, her eyes lowered as though she did not want to intrude on the family's moment. She looked calm, but Michael could see the faint nervousness in her posture, the way she held herself back. He realized then that he was not the only one carrying emotions in that room. Clara had been with his children day and night while he was away. She had dried their tears, listened to their stories, and comforted them when they longed for him. For the twins, she was not only the maid, she had become a pillar in their young lives. When the children finally loosened their grip, Michael gently set them down. Emma immediately tugged at his hand, eager to show him her drawings scattered across the carpet. Ethan picked up a toy car, insisting on demonstrating how fast it could go. Their voices overlapped, their excitement bubbling over, and Michael laughed, soaking in their joy. But even as he listened to them, his eyes kept glancing at Clara. She smiled faintly at the twins' excitement, yet she remained quiet, almost trying to fade into the background. Michael crouched down beside his children, admiring their drawings and toys, but a thought weighed heavily on his mind. How many of these little milestones had he missed? How many times had Clara sat exactly where he was sitting now, cheering them on, clapping for their achievements, encouraging their every step? He remembered the story he had just overheard before entering the room: Clara's gentle assurance to Emma and Ethan that he loved them and would one day come back. That memory pierced him deeply. She had protected his image in their eyes. She could have told them the painful truth, that their father was too busy, too far away. Instead, she gave them hope, shielding them from disappointment. As the children continued to chatter, Michael finally turned to Clara. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Clara looked up, surprised. "For what, sir?" Michael's eyes held hers for a moment. "For being there when I wasn't." Clara lowered her gaze again, her voice gentle. "I only did what needed to be done. They're wonderful children. They make it easy to love them." Michael felt his chest ache again. She had said it so simply, as if her sacrifice had been nothing extraordinary. But he knew better. Raising children was never easy, and raising them while they longed for a parent was even harder. Clara had carried that burden silently, without ever asking for recognition. The twins tugged at his arms again, pulling him back into their games. He laughed, lifting them both up at once, spinning them around as they squealed with delight. Their laughter filled the room like music, and Michael realized how much he had been starving for this sound. Still, beneath the joy, guilt gnawed at him. He remembered the countless times he had chosen a meeting over a phone call, a deal over a holiday, a contract over a birthday. He had told himself it was all for them, that every hour spent away was an investment in their future. But now, holding them close, he wondered if he had been investing in the wrong things all along. Later that evening, after the excitement settled, Michael sat in the living room with his children curled up beside him. Emma rested against his arm, humming softly, while Ethan leaned against his chest, half asleep. Clara entered quietly with a tray of warm milk and cookies, setting it on the table without a word. She was about to step out when Michael stopped her. "Clara," he said gently, "please sit with us for a while." She hesitated, glancing at the twins, but when she saw their hopeful faces, she agreed and sat at the edge of the sofa. For a few minutes, they sat together in silence, the room filled only with the sound of the children's soft breathing and the ticking clock on the wall. Finally, Michael spoke. "I saw everything earlier," he admitted. "I saw how you've been with them. Teaching them, comforting them, loving them." Clara looked down at her hands. "I didn't mean to overstep, sir. I just did what felt right for the children." Michael shook his head. "You didn't overstep. You did what I should have been doing." His voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. "I can't tell you how grateful I am. I left thinking I was giving them a better future, but I see now that I was also leaving behind the present." Clara's eyes softened, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. The truth was already clear between them. Emma suddenly stirred, lifting her sleepy eyes to look at Clara. "Clara, will you stay here tonight too?" she asked, her voice drowsy. Ethan nodded lazily. "Yeah, don't go." Clara smiled faintly, brushing Ethan's hair back from his forehead. "Of course, little one. I'm not going anywhere." Michael watched the exchange silently, his heart heavy yet hopeful. His children's trust in Clara was unshakable. Instead of feeling threatened, he felt humbled again. He realized that love was not something that divided when shared, it multiplied. Clara's love had not replaced his own. It had protected it, preserved it, kept it alive until he could return. As the night deepened, Michael carried the twins upstairs to their room. Clara followed, helping tuck them into bed. The children clutched both their hands, one small hand holding Michael's, the other holding Clara's as they drifted off to sleep. Standing by the bed, Michael looked at their peaceful faces, then at Clara. Quietly, he whispered, "You've been more than a maid to them. You've been a mother when they needed one." Clara's eyes glistened, though she tried to hide it. "I only did what anyone with a heart would do." But Michael knew it wasn't true. Not everyone would have done what she did. She had given pieces of herself, day after day, with no expectation of reward. That night, as he lay awake in his own room, Michael thought about everything he had witnessed. He realized he could never return to the life he had been living. His children didn't just need his money or his gifts. They needed him, his presence, his laughter, his guidance, his love. And he silently vowed that from now on, he would never let his business steal these moments away again. The picture of Clara holding his children close lingered in his mind. It was both a painful reminder of his absence and a blessing that someone had stepped into the gap he had left behind. He whispered into the darkness, almost like a prayer, "Thank you, Clara. And forgive me, my children. Things will be different now." And with that promise in his heart, Michael finally closed his eyes, ready to start anew. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the large windows of the mansion, spilling warmth across the polished floors. Michael had barely slept, but for the first time in years, he didn't mind. His heart was still full from the night before. The memory of his twins' little arms around him, their sleepy voices calling him Daddy, replayed in his mind again and again like the sweetest song. As he stepped into the dining room, the sound of laughter greeted him. Emma and Ethan were already at the table, giggling as Clara helped them pour milk into their bowls of cereal. Emma had managed to spill some on the table, and Ethan found it hilarious. Clara, patient as always, simply wiped the mess with a napkin and smiled. Michael paused in the doorway, watching the scene. It was ordinary, simple, and yet it felt extraordinary to him. He realized he had missed so many mornings like this, mornings where laughter was louder than any business deal, mornings where love filled the air more richly than the smell of expensive coffee. When Clara noticed him, she quickly straightened, looking a little flustered. "Good morning, sir," she said politely. Emma and Ethan jumped from their chairs and ran to him, hugging his legs. "Daddy! Come eat with us," they chorused, pulling him toward the table. Michael chuckled, letting them drag him along. All right, I'm coming." He sat down between them, feeling their small bodies press against him as they climbed back into their seats. As he ate with them, he noticed how naturally Clara moved around the table. She didn't act like just a maid serving food, she moved like someone who belonged there, someone who understood every detail of the children's habits. She knew exactly how Emma liked her toast cut and how Ethan preferred his milk slightly warm. Michael's heart swelled with gratitude, but at the same time, guilt pricked him again. These were the things he should have known. These were the little details a father was supposed to learn from being present every day. Instead, Clara had learned them while he was away chasing success. After breakfast, Emma begged her father to see her drawings in the playroom, while Ethan wanted to race toy cars with him. Michael laughed, torn between both requests, and finally promised to do both. The twins squealed with delight, pulling him along, their faces glowing with happiness. Clara lingered by the dining table, quietly cleaning up. Michael glanced back at her as he left with the children, and their eyes met for a brief moment. His gaze said what his words hadn't yet: "Thank you." Clara lowered her eyes and smiled softly, as though she understood. The rest of the morning passed with joy. Michael played on the carpet with his twins, pretending to lose races and letting them laugh at his silly mistakes. He clapped for Emma's colorful drawings, praising her creativity, and listened carefully to Ethan's stories about his toy cars. Each moment filled him with warmth, but also with the painful awareness of how much he had missed. By the afternoon, when the children grew tired and went down for a nap, Michael finally found a quiet moment with Clara. She was in the garden, watering the flowers. The sun shone on her face, and her movements were calm and steady. He walked over slowly, his hands in his pockets. "Clara," he began gently, "can we talk?" She looked up, a little startled, then nodded. "Of course, sir." Michael hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "I don't know how to thank you," he said finally. "You've done more for my children than I ever expected. You've given them love, stability, and care when I wasn't here. I saw it with my own eyes yesterday. You've been more than a maid. You've been like a mother to them." Clara's eyes softened, though she shook her head modestly. "I only did what was needed. They're such wonderful children. Anyone would love them." Michael's voice grew heavy with emotion. "No, Clara. Not everyone would. Many people would have done only their duty and nothing more. But you gave them your heart. You taught them, comforted them, and even kept their faith in me alive. For that, I will always be grateful." Clara looked down at the flowers, her hands tightening around the watering can. "I never wanted them to feel abandoned. They're too young to carry such heavy feelings. So I told them stories, reminded them that you loved them, and promised them you'd come back. And now you have." Her words struck Michael deeply. He realized that without her, his children might have grown bitter, believing their father had forgotten them. Clara had protected their innocence, shielding them from pain he had unknowingly caused. "I owe you so much," he said quietly. "More than I can ever repay." Clara shook her head again, her voice firm yet kind. "You don't owe me anything, sir. Just be here for them now. That's all they need." Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. Her humility humbled him even more. She wasn't asking for recognition or reward. She only cared about the children's happiness. That evening, as the family sat down for dinner together, Michael made a decision. He would not let another day slip away without giving Clara the respect she deserved. When the children were busy chatting, he turned to her and said, "From now on, you are not just the maid in this house. You are part of this family." Clara looked startled, her eyes widening. "Sir, I can't," but Michael interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "You can. You already are. My children love you. They trust you. And I respect you more than words can say. This house is as much yours as it is ours." Emma clapped her hands excitedly. "Yes. Clara is family." Ethan nodded eagerly. "Family forever." Clara's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. She lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say." Michael smiled softly. "You don't need to say anything. Just stay with us, as you always have. But know that you are valued, not only as someone who works here but as someone who belongs here." The twins cheered, hugging Clara tightly, their little arms wrapping around her waist. Clara knelt down, hugging them back, her face glowing with both joy and humility. Michael watched the scene, his heart full. For the first time in years, the mansion felt alive. It wasn't just a grand house with walls of stone and marble. It was a home filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of people who truly cared for one another. That night, after the children were asleep, Michael sat alone in his study, reflecting on everything that had happened. He thought about the years he had wasted, the milestones he had missed, and the people he had taken for granted. But he also thought about the second chance life had given him, a chance to change, to be present, and to rebuild what he had almost lost. He whispered to himself, "I won't waste this chance. Not again." The image of Clara reading stories to his children, comforting them, and defending him in his absence lingered in his mind. It was a picture of love that no amount of money could buy. He finally understood that the true wealth in his life wasn't his bank account or his business empire. It was right here, in this house, in the form of two children who loved him unconditionally and a woman who had cared for them as if they were her own. For Michael, that realization was both humbling and freeing. He had spent years chasing success, but now he knew where true success lay, in the simple, irreplaceable bonds of family. The days that followed felt different in the mansion. The silence that had once filled its halls was now replaced by laughter, footsteps, and conversations. Michael noticed it every morning when he woke up to the sound of his twins running down the hallway. It was a sound that reminded him of what he had missed but also of what he now had the chance to embrace. Michael began to spend more time with Emma and Ethan, not as a guest in their lives but as their father. He sat with them during meals, listened to their endless stories, and joined them in their games, no matter how silly they seemed. If they wanted to build a tower of blocks, he was there. If they wanted to draw messy pictures, he was there too, scribbling alongside them. For the first time, the twins had a father who was not only present in their hearts but also in their everyday lives. Yet every time Michael watched them laugh, he remembered Clara. He saw how naturally she guided the children, how they instinctively looked for her approval and comfort. It didn't bother him anymore. Instead, it humbled him, because he knew that without her steady presence, his children's hearts might not have been so open to him now. One evening, as the family sat in the garden, Emma crawled into her father's lap and asked innocently, "Daddy, will you leave again soon?" The question struck Michael like a stone. He wrapped his arms around her gently, pressing his chin against her soft hair. "No, my princess. I'm not going anywhere. I've been away too much already, and I don't want to miss another day with you." Ethan looked up from the toy car he was playing with. "So you'll be here tomorrow too?" Michael nodded firmly. "Tomorrow and every day after that." The children beamed, their little faces shining with relief. Michael felt tears sting his eyes. He had made many promises in business, but this promise to his children was the most important he had ever made. Later that night, when the twins were asleep, Michael called Clara into his study. She entered quietly, unsure why he had asked for her. The room was dimly lit, the shelves lined with books and awards, symbols of his career. But tonight, none of those achievements seemed to matter to him. "Clara," he began softly, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, waiting patiently. Michael leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. "For years, I thought I was doing the right thing by working hard and building a fortune. I believed money would protect my children and give them the best future. But I see now that I was wrong. Money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy love. It cannot replace a parent's presence." Clara lowered her gaze, listening quietly. Michael's voice grew heavier with emotion. "You stepped into a role that should have been mine. You gave them not just food or care, but love, guidance, and hope. You taught them lessons, wiped their tears, and made sure they never felt alone. I will never forget that. And I don't want you to think of yourself as just the maid anymore. You are family. This home would not be whole without you." Clara's eyes glistened, though she tried to keep her voice steady. "Sir, I only did what my heart told me to do. I never wanted your children to feel lonely. I never wanted them to lose faith in you." Michael smiled faintly. "And because of you, they didn't. That's a gift I can never repay." He paused, then added, "But from now on, I intend to try. Not with money or rewards, but with respect, gratitude, and by being the father they deserve." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Clara spoke softly. "That's all they ever wanted, sir. Just you." Her words pierced him deeply, but they also gave him strength. He knew she was right. His children had never asked for riches. They had only ever wanted his time, his love, and his presence. The weeks turned into months, and Michael kept his promise. He adjusted his work, delegating tasks to others, refusing to travel unnecessarily. He was home for birthdays, bedtime stories, and Sunday mornings in the garden. Slowly, the emptiness that had once lived in his children's eyes disappeared, replaced by joy and security. One Sunday afternoon, as they all sat in the living room, Emma announced proudly, "Daddy plays with us every day now." Ethan added with excitement, "And he even makes funny voices when he reads stories." Clara laughed softly, her eyes shining as she watched the children's happiness. Michael looked at her and smiled too, silently thanking her again. The mansion, which had once been cold and quiet, now felt alive with warmth. The walls echoed with love, and even the smallest moments like breakfast together or an evening walk in the garden felt precious. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with golden hues, Michael stood at the balcony, watching his children chase each other across the lawn. Clara stood nearby, holding a basket of freshly folded clothes. For a while, they both watched the twins together in silence. "They're happy," Clara said softly, almost to herself. Michael nodded. "Yes. Happier than I've ever seen them. And that's because of you." Clara shook her head gently. "No, sir. It's because of you. You came back. You chose them." Michael turned to her, his expression sincere. "It's because of both of us. You kept their hearts safe until I could return. And now, I intend to protect what you've preserved." Clara smiled, her eyes filled with quiet pride. As the evening grew darker, Michael thought about the journey that had brought him here. He had traveled the world, earned wealth beyond measure, and built a name that people admired. Yet none of those things compared to what he had rediscovered at home. His children's laughter was his true fortune. Clara's kindness was his unexpected blessing. And the love that filled this house was his greatest achievement. From that day forward, Michael never let a day pass without reminding his twins how much he loved them. He read them bedtime stories, helped them with their lessons, and played with them until they were breathless with laughter. He no longer saw these moments as small or ordinary. He saw them as treasures, the very treasures he had once overlooked. And every time he saw Clara watching over the children with her gentle eyes, he felt humbled again. She had been the bridge between his absence and his return. She had been the reason his children had not lost faith in him. And he knew in his heart that she would always remain a part of their family. Michael had come home as a millionaire. But what he discovered was something money could never buy, the true wealth of love, family, and the second chance to be the father he was always meant to be.